For centuries, the Romanovs were one of the most powerful dynasties in the world. Over 100 years ago, in 1918, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and all 5 of their children were executed. Tragically, the family's final act of hope may have accidentally turned their last moments into a real-life nightmare. The tragic story of the end of the Romanov dynasty can be traced back to Empress Alexandra, the matriarch of the Romanovs and the last Tsarina of Russia. Born Alex of Hesse and the Rhine, in 1872 she was actually a granddaughter of Queen Victoria. But Alexandra's family hid a dark secret. The men of their royal line tended to suffer from the fatal condition of hemophilia, an illness that prevents blood from clotting. When Alexandra was barely a year old, her hemophiliac brother Friedrich died after a nasty fall. When Alexandra was 12 years old, she had an almost literal date with destiny. In 1884, she met the future Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, then just a prince, at her sister's wedding. Over the years, they grew close, and soon they both fell in love. Nicholas even spoke of her in his diary, writing, "It is my dream to one day marry Alex H." Nicholas's family hated Alexandra, especially his mother Maria. The matriarch thought Alexandra was neurotic and stubborn. She was also disdainful of Alexandra's German heritage and deeply suspicious that she carried the gene for hemophilia. In 1894, Nicholas's father, Alexander III, fell ill. Nicholas was about to become Tsar and desperately needed to start producing heirs. Since Alexandra was the only woman he would consent to marry, his mother and father gave in and at last let the engagement go ahead. The old Tsar died just weeks later, and Nicholas became the ruler of Russia. The new Tsar carted Alexandra from Germany and married her on November 22, 1894, a week after his father's funeral. As a result, the nuptials had very little pomp and circumstance, at least as royal weddings go. The Tsar and Tsarina may have been stately monarchs, but they had a very steamy bedroom life. For one, they insisted on sharing a bed. While this may not seem like much, most royal marriages at the time were all business, and many monarchs kept separate bedrooms. Just months after the royal wedding, the couple made a momentous announcement. They were expecting a child. Everyone in the palace eagerly awaited a boy, most especially Alexandra herself. After all, giving Russia a male heir would solidify her place in court and transform her from a suspicious outsider to the mother of the crown prince. Unfortunately for her, Empress Alexandra had a baby girl, Olga. Surprisingly, Alexandra and Nicholas didn't seem to mind. Nicholas remarked, "We are grateful she was a daughter. If she was a boy, she would have belonged to the people. Being a girl, she belongs to us." In the first months and years of little Princess Olga's life, disturbing reports began coming out of the palace. Aides whispered that the Romanov princess bled abnormal amounts, stirring up the old rumors that Alexandra was a carrier of the hemophilia gene that had killed her own brother. For now, though, they remained rumors. Less than 2 years later, Empress Alexandra gave birth to yet another girl, the Grand Duchess Tatiana. By this time, Alexandra and Nicholas were definitely getting antsy for a boy. When Alexandra saw that she had given birth to another girl, she asked, "What will the nation say?" Luckily, Tatiana had a secret weapon. She was a stunning child and looked exactly like her mother Alexandra. Growing up, Tatiana's siblings called her the governess because of her controlling nature. The Romanov bunch made her their unofficial leader, in spite of the fact that Olga was older. They especially deployed Tatiana whenever someone needed to sweet-talk Tsar Nicholas. In 1899, Empress Alexandra became pregnant again. Once again, it was a princess instead of a crown prince, the Grand Duchess Maria. 2 girls in a row might be bad luck, but 3 was beginning to look like a curse for Alexandra and Nicholas. Even Queen Victoria weighed in on the matter, writing, "I regret the third girl for the country." The Tsar and Tsarina were deeply disappointed, but Maria did offer some consolation. Maria was a gorgeous young girl with many relatives and family friends constantly commenting on her natural beauty. Her family nicknamed her big blue eyes Maria's saucers. Once, a gentleman even said that Maria had the face of a Botticelli angel, but her angelic face hid a disturbing truth. In 1914, Maria faced a life-threatening ordeal. In a seemingly routine operation to remove her tonsils, the princess began bleeding profusely, so much so that the doctor operating stopped partway through. It was a clear indication that the Russian princess was a carrier of hemophilia, but no one in the palace was ready to face the truth. Luckily, she managed to survive, but the family's health problems were a constant threat for Alexandra. Alexandra and Nicholas were never going to give up on having a male heir, so 1909 was particularly crushing. This was the year that they gave birth to their fourth and most famous daughter, the Grand Duchess Anastasia. If the first three girls had successively dampened their morale, Anastasia shattered it. Reportedly, when Nicholas heard the news, he had to take a long walk to collect himself. Princess Anastasia is almost a hallowed, mythical name today, but the real girl was a lot more human than we like to think. While the three eldest Romanov girls were prim, proper, and ladylike, Anastasia was not. She was reportedly a naughty child and often got into trouble for her conduct. She would kick and scratch her playmates, pull pranks on household staff, and even climb trees when she didn't want to do homework. On her good days, this earned her the nickname Imp, but her bad days, watch out. In 1904, the Tsar and Tsarina finally got what they wanted. Alexandra gave birth to a boy, Alexei. When the Empress finally emerged from her haze, she looked out across the room and saw a sea of joyous faces. She knew exactly what that meant, crying out, "Oh, it cannot be true. It cannot be true. Is it really a boy?" It really was. The only person who was more excited than the Tsarina, the Tsar himself. Later that day, Tsar Nicholas II retired to his office to write in his diary, "A great and unforgettable day for us. There are no words to thank God enough for sending us this comfort in a time of sore trials." At first, he seemed a perfectly healthy child. His aunt noted that he was an amazingly hefty baby with a chest like a barrel and the air of a warrior knight. Unfortunately, when the time came to cut the umbilical cord, they realized something was terribly wrong. After Alexandra's labor, doctors noticed that Alexei's cut umbilical cord wound would not stop bleeding. Over the next few days, the imperial family confronted the whole horrific reality. Alexandra was a carrier of hemophilia, and not only that, she had passed it down to her only son. The Romanovs were thunderstruck with grief at Alexei's illness, and it drove them to a very controversial decision. They decided to keep his hemophilia a state secret, known only to their loyal inner circle, in order to support stability and peace in their country. It was supposed to save them, but as we know, it did not. The new prince's nickname was Baby, and the mood of the whole Russian court often hinged on how Baby was feeling. When he was healthy, the rest of the family was relaxed and happy. But his more serious episodes would fill them with great worry and melancholy. Cuts that won't stop bleeding aren't the only problems that come with hemophilia. Alexei had countless other symptoms and concerns, but the worst by far was when internal lesions caused blood to seep into his joints. In those moments, Alexei could scarcely move without feeling excruciating pain. In 1907, a 3-year-old Alexei Romanov stumbled and hurt his leg. Totally normal for a boy his age, but Alexei Romanov was not like other boys. The minor fall caused internal hemorrhaging. Within mere hours, the little Tsarevich was at death's door. He lay in bed, contorted in pain, with dark patches under his eyes and a frighteningly swollen leg. Doctors frantically did everything they could to save the boy, but nothing worked. The family grew desperate and they found help in a sinister place. Running out of options, Alexandra called for a strange mystic from Siberia who claimed to be able to heal the boy. His name was Grigory Rasputin, and the Tsarina invited him straight into the royal palace. He prayed over Alexei's withering frame and said, "Your pain is going away. You will soon be well. You must thank God for healing you, and now go to sleep." Then Rasputin left, and the Romanovs prayed for a miracle, and they got one. The next morning, Alexei Romanov was a whole new kid. While he'd lay in agony before, scarcely able to move, he now sat up in bed, his fever and swelling gone. It truly did seem like a miracle. From that day, the Tsar and Tsarina trusted Rasputin above anyone else when it came to Alexei's health. But inviting this mystic into their lives had terrible consequences. With this miracle cure, Rasputin had fully enchanted Empress Alexandra. The Tsarina made all her children call him "our friend," and further forced them to share their deepest secrets with the holy man, performing makeshift confessionals with him. Soon enough, people started to notice. According to a persistent rumor at the time, Rasputin had not only seduced Empress Alexandra, but also the 4 Romanov girls. One aunt reported seeing Rasputin caressing the girls. Whatever the case, the cracks were starting to show. Not everyone in the palace was under Rasputin's spell, and the girls' governess, Sofia Tucheva, was decidedly not a fan. One day, the governess entered the royal nursery and made a horrific discovery. The young girls were spending time with Rasputin, dressed only in their thin nightgowns. Sofia reported the scene to Tsar Nicholas, who wasn't quite as mesmerized with Rasputin as his wife was. Nicholas immediately requested that Rasputin stop his casual nursery visits. Alexandra was so angry at the governess that she fired her in retaliation. Throughout her time as Tsarina, Alexandra never quite managed to win the hearts of the Russian people. Despite her best efforts, her German heritage made Russians suspicious of her, and her obsession with Rasputin didn't help. As anti-German sentiment rose in the lead-up to World War I, Russian hatred became even more focused on her and her Siberian mystic. The eldest Romanov princess, Olga, appeared to be increasingly uncomfortable with Rasputin's power over her parents and fought to break free. She also seemed to sense that Russia was rising up. Once asking a servant, "Why has the feeling in the country changed against my father?" In 1914, World War I broke out. It was the worst thing that could have happened to the Romanovs. Germany was now a machine built for warfare, and Russia was basically fighting back with sticks. It didn't matter how many men Tsar Nicholas had, they just couldn't contend with the German army. And then Nicholas made a fatal error. Rasputin had a disastrous vision in which he saw that the Russian army would only succeed if the Tsar personally took over command. Nicholas listened, but it was a huge mistake. It caused massive losses and unrest, kickstarting the downfall of the Romanovs. World War I also damaged the relationship between the Tsar and the aristocrats. They knew something had to change, and they had just the ticket. On December 30th, 1916, powerful courtiers infamously killed Rasputin, stripping the Romanovs of their strange favorite. After World War I and Rasputin's violent end, Russia was in utter shambles. Responding to rumblings of revolution, Tsar Nicholas tried to use his guards to quell unrest in St. Petersburg. But when he ordered them to fire upon the gathering citizens, he got the shock of his life. They completely refused, firing into the air instead. With this, the revolution began. Within days of the mutiny, the government pushed Nicholas to resign. The mere idea horrified the Tsar, but what could he do? He had no support and no troops. He agreed to abdicate and formally ended his rule on March 15, 1917. In doing so, he brought 3 centuries of uninterrupted Romanov rule to an end, but his troubles were far from over. At first, life wasn't so bad for the disgraced Romanovs. They lived under guard at their luxurious Alexandra palace. Nicholas and his family could pretend that things were totally normal. Besides, they had an escape plan that was sure to work. Nicholas's cousin, King George V of England, had already assured the family that they could seek asylum with him. King George V looked nearly identical to Nicholas II, and they were very close. Yet when Nicholas reached out, George utterly betrayed his cousin. He rescinded his offer, believing that Nicholas's presence would damage his own monarchy, and thus left the Romanovs to the wolves. At this point, the Bolsheviks had taken control of the government. In April 1918, the Bolsheviks moved the Romanovs to the city of Yekaterinburg. They often had to camp in the middle of nowhere or ford across frigid rivers. After a grueling 5-day journey, they finally made it to Yekaterinburg. This was where the Romanovs met their chilling fate. The revolutionaries didn't look kindly on the Romanovs continuing to live in privilege. As a result, they prepared the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg for the family and called it the House of Special Purpose. As the family entered the house, the captors addressed Nicholas as Citizen Nicholas Romanov, indicating that their royal titles were a thing of the past. Life at the Ipatiev house was harsh. For perhaps the first time ever, the Romanovs had to do their own laundry and make their own food. The girls wore dirty uniforms and their hair was often unkempt. For Nicholas, the final humiliation came when he received the order that he could no longer wear epaulets, the last petty symbol of his former authority. In the midnight hours of July 17, 1918, the end finally came. The Romanovs were all forced into a basement to face a Bolshevik firing squad. Bullets and gunpowder filled the tiny room, but when the smoke cleared, the disoriented soldiers made a jaw-dropping realization. The execution had gone horribly wrong. Earlier in their captivity, Nicholas and Alexandra urged their children to sew jewels into their clothing in order to conceal them from the Bolsheviks. That way they'd have valuables on hand if they ever managed to escape. On the night of the execution, the Romanov children were wearing their jewel-encrusted clothing. As a result, the diamonds and stones acted as bulletproof vests. The bullets bounced off of the clothing, wounding but not killing the children, though Nicholas and Alexandra had perished in the first shots. When the Bolsheviks discovered that the children were still alive, they had to ram them up again and painstakingly finish the job. After the Bolsheviks extinguished the entire Romanov family, they set about disposing the bodies. When they did, they came across a disturbing discovery. Each of the Romanov girls was wearing an amulet with Grigory Rasputin's image hidden inside. Even years after his death, the mad monk still held an eerie hold over the royal family. The Bolsheviks buried the bodies of the Romanovs in an unmarked grave, and the Soviet Union did not publicize their passing. In fact, the government didn't even acknowledge the execution of the Romanov family for 8 years. This led to speculation that some of them might possibly still be alive. For decades, the so-called Anna Anderson, a patient in a Berlin asylum, claimed that she was, in fact, the Grand Duchess Anastasia, and that she managed to escape the execution. While not everyone bought it, many did comment on how much she looked and acted like the Grand Duchess. In 1994, experts compared Anna Anderson's tissues to a sample from Anastasia's relative Prince Philip. The findings confirmed the tragic truth. There was no match. Historians now believe Anderson was actually Franciszka Schanzowska, a mentally ill Polish factory worker. We still don't know for certain how exactly the Romanov children died, or what happened after the execution was carried out. Based on the condition of their unearthed skeletons, a rather chilling theory is that while Nicholas II was definitely shot, his children, covered in their family's priceless heirlooms, were doused with acid and even burned at one point, possibly while they were still alive. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe for more fascinating content.